build a home or a hotel, a traditional farm or a server farm. Introducing Hacienda Castilla. St. Matthew's Assurance presents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Over 800 square miles of pristine, uninhabited coastal property in central Chile, ready for industrial, business, and residential development. Hacienda Castilla features almost unlimited open spaces and some of the most beautiful beaches in South America. With parcels ranging from 20 acres to over 200 acres, Hacienda Castilla will be adjacent to Copia Port A, the deepest natural port in all of South America. Experience future-forward development limited only by your imagination. What will you create at Hacienda Castilla? Become part of something completely new. For more, visit haciendacastilla.net today.
Happy Monday, Lisa, and I see Tom is here with us already. Actually, it's not just Mondays. It's Happy Fauci Pardon Day. It is Happy Martin Luther King Day, and it's Happy Inauguration Day. It's Monday. Wow, we finally
Lots going on.
Lots going on today. So welcome to you both to Truth Be Told. This is going to be an interesting discussion we have today. Tom, we'll get to you in a minute. If you don't mind, go ahead and pull them out, John. We'll bring him back. There you go. And I had a few things to talk to you about real quickly. Lisa, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you today?
Yeah,
So far.
trepidatious would be the words that I describe, because as we have all worked together now for 4 years in pursuant of a stop to the shots and the saving or the salvation of humanity, I remain deeply concerned that the poison shots are not going to have a reckoning, that things are going on. I got to tell you, I understood from personal involvement and others around that all the anti-vaxxers that were helping the Trump administration in their transition team are gone. And guess who's an anti-vaxxer?
Who's an anti-vaxxer?
You and me.
Well, yes, we are. Yes, we are. We're leading that charge, aren't we?
And we have an anti-vaxxer, so to speak. I can't put words in Tom's mouth, but that's who we're going to talk to today. Major Tom Haviland retired from the Air Force. He's got some interesting information and personal involvement. It's whistleblower style stuff. You and I love this. It's what we do for a living, is actually helping people get their word out. So I'm glad that you're here today. That's because you're a wealth of information. And thank you for sending out so much information to learned people who need to know exactly what's in the shots. And if it isn't the COVID shots, the poison are in everything else anyway, are they not?
Well, it is. And, not to be Debbie Downer, but, people do, it's overwhelming to wrap your head around this, but we've got to start to face the reality that, the pharmaceutical industry, preferably the vaccines, because they can enforce those and they can make them, that they can promote the regular flu vaccine and they can, scare people into getting it for their children. But these have become an enforcer for governments. They've become agents.
Yes, they have. And let us recall that what is recommended as childhood vaccines by the CDC is adopted as policy by the states, and they force the kids to take these. You can't go to school, whether it's college or grade school or anywhere in between camps. We've seen it all. We're not through the fire, Lisa. We're not through it yet. And we're going to talk to Tom today about that. But first, I'm going to do a bit of a monologue to help people understand. We're still here, but we're still here.
And, it is winning a battle like this is not easy. We're dealing with a mafia that has been in power for centuries. They're not going to give it up.
I'm thinking millennia, but we're going to find out. So with that said, let me get through the monologue. We'll have you back with questions towards the end. Thank you as always, Lisa, and to the Vax Choice family, Clout Hub family. Ladies and gentlemen, be on the lookout, by the way. We've got a brand new version of Clout Hub that's going to rock your world. It's going to be really spectacular. I saw a bit of a demo today. We're going to roll it out and make your lives a lot easier. I think there's a lot more tools and functionality. So I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag. Be on the lookout. It's coming, and it's going to be really cool. I also want to thank my friend Johanna, because she has made the introduction of Tom and some other folks, and she's just a blessing to be had by all. So there's a lot of really cool content up and coming that I'm sure you appreciate. In terms of not being out of the woods yet, John, go ahead and play that first clip, will you? Chemtrails? What are those? Yeah, there really are chemtrails. Weather Modification Act, blinding us to the sun. I don't know if you've got it ready, John, but let's see what you got. Yeah, that's the piece of it. Watch this, folks. It'll blow your mind. What is that? Big cloud? Yeah, there's no chemtrails. But that's just contrails, because they're so high that the vapor's being frozen. No, it isn't. Look at the next one. This pilot flips the down switch. So that one already. Move to the next one. All right. Okay, did you get the next one, John? It's Japan Airlines on the ramp, blowing out smoke. This is going to take a long time if we're not ready. All right, fine, skip it, go on to the smart cities. All right, that's fine. So there's no chemtrails. None at all. I don't know what that is coming out of that jet, but it sure does look like chemtrails on the ground. What is this in furtherance of, ladies and gentlemen? This is in furtherance of the depopulation agenda. We are being modified into other organisms, and this is part of it. Some of the fallout. That's all right, John. Stop that one. Please queue up the Smart Cities agenda one, if you wouldn't mind, because all of this is designed to drive us into smart cities, because everything else is contaminated. If there is aluminum in those clouds, which of course there is, barium, all kinds of other stuff, then what stops the government from saying, oh, we found 1 part per million on your land, so I'm sorry, but CERCLA, super fun. We gotta clean up this land. It's your bill. But it's all combined. This is all part of one thing. So if you play this clip, I think it's a little bit helpful to understand. Please kick that off at 158, if you would, please. All right, that was the one I wanted you to play, 158.
13 nations and using the ashes.
After 3 years of planning, city administration is presenting its vision to accommodate a population of 2 million people through 15-minute cities. 3 days of public hearings on the plan began at City Hall this morning. Shailen Skulski has more.
The 15 new district plans and corresponding bylaws will replace 54 existing planning documents dating back to the 1980s. Administration says the goal is to accommodate 600,000 new residents in redeveloped areas, with 50% of all new home units added through infill. The plan also calls for half of all future travel to be done by transit, and for residents to access all their daily needs within 15 minutes.
Just wait.
That's right. What is infill? Right, 600,000 new inhabitants. Infill, I'll tell you what that is. It's high concentration housing. So in Palisades, one of the problems from the owner's perspective is that there's too few people spread out too much of an area. So what they effectively are doing is wiping it clear, and then they are going to force people into high density housing. So if you've got land and you're on the outskirts of a city like LA or any C40 city, I'd be painting my roof blue because these gangsters are coming for us. And it seems to me that they're using directed energy weapons, because you see these blue trash cans, blue cars that seem to survive these outrageous fires or become a tree, because they all survive as well. Listen to this guy, the real estate broker in California, saying what's going to happen to the people in Palisades. This is kind of surprising. if you can get that one, there you go.
They want to move back to the Palisades. Are they considering moving elsewhere? Do they?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Look, this is hard to say. I strongly believe that 50% of the people who lived in the Palisades are not going to be moving back to the Palisades.
Why?
Yeah, and honestly, that number wasn't as big last week in my mind, but after the phone calls that I've been getting, people who are moving to Brentwood, Santa Monica, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, those are going to be the markets that are going to go up because people want to be as close to normalcy as possible.
Yeah.
And those are those towns right around the Palisades.
Yeah.
Those are going to go up, that market. That's where they're going to move. It's going to be too long. You got to realize.
You know, what he's not saying to you is that that's where people want to go to. Now, whether or not they can actually go there is a different matter, because there just isn't enough housing with those kinds of desires in mind, unless, of course, they want to move into an apartment complex or something like that. This is where the teeny homes come in, right? We've been trained for this. You got to live a Spartan life in a little hovel, and that's luxury. You won't own it, but you're going to be happy. Don't forget that. The excuse here, per the Sustainable Development Goals and under Agenda 2030, is a carbon issue. Really? Well, how does that one work? Us humans apparently make 800% too much carbon. So they're expecting us to reduce our lives, literally, down to a fraction of what we're currently doing. Play that clip if you wouldn't mind, John. It starts at 15 seconds in. That's all we need. Okay. Failing that, let's move on to the other part. The next asset up is a 62%. It's actually 62.3% reduction in the sperm count globally, right? How is that? Because how are you going to get an 800% reduction in humans' carbon output other than getting rid of humans? Who said that before? Bill Gates said that before. And others, by the way, if you haven't seen it before, look it up. It's called The Good Club. Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, amongst others, got together in New York circa 2009, said, we're here to depopulate the planet. We're going to figure it out, and we're the Good Club. Well, you're seeing it, ladies and gentlemen. And today we have with us Tom Haviland, retired military guy, was a first-person witness to some of the things happening as it related to the shots. And he took it upon himself to figure out what's going on with these white clots. We've got some learned experts who understand this stuff. Today, you're our fact witness. Tom, welcome to Truth Be Told. Thank you for coming. If you wouldn't mind, give people a little bit of background.
Sure. Thanks, Tom, for having me on the show. I'm Tom Haviland. I live in Dayton, Ohio. I'm a retired U.S. Air Force major. Spent 20 years in the Air Force. Before that, actually, I went to school. I'm a graduate of Ohio State University with a bachelor's in mathematics. I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Louisiana Tech and a master's in computer resources and information management from Webster University in St. Louis. Spent most of my Air Force career working with great fighter aircraft like the F-16 Falcon, the F-22 Raptor, and the F-117 stealth fighter.
Wow.
But that career came to a screeching halt, Todd, in October 2021 when I refused to take Joe Biden's mandated COVID vaccine. A 3-star Air Force general had sent out an email in early October, and with the dates for everybody had to get the shots by, the military, the government civilians, and us defense contractors, which I was one, working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. And I knew there was problems with the vaccine. We'd seen stoppage, for example, the J&J shot for clotting problems in April of 2021. I was doing research and saw some other problems too with the vaccines. I was also looking at our own CDC wasn't putting out very good information, but the Public Health England, their counterpart in the UK, was. And they had a document that had come out that showed there were hundreds of thousands of breakthrough cases of COVID amongst the fully vaccinated by the early fall of 2021. So I knew, I didn't want to take this shot. It was unethical. It was a brand new technology. So I sent this 3-star Air Force general back an email. And in that email, I said, shame on you. Instead of standing up for our right to decide for ourselves whether or not to take an experimental drug, You chose to spend your time trying to guilt us into taking the jab. Shame on you.
God.
And I didn't just send that email to him, Todd. I CC'd all 30,000 people that work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. So I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
I got a call a half hour later from the boss of the company that I worked for, and I was fired from my $165,000 a year engineering job because I shamed the Air Force general in front of the entire base. But somebody had to do it, Todd. None of the generals were pushing back on these unlawful mandates.
None. We were intimately involved in that. My pro bono law firm's called Disabled Rights Advocates, and we filed a suit against the DOD. We filed a temporary restraining order. Like you, we had substantial evidence, about 1,000 pages of evidence showing how poisonous these were, and that all the test animals died. And then, by the way, 30% of the contents, up to 50%, is antifreeze. So we put this in front of Secretary Austin before he issued the order. We personally served him, and he issued the order anyway. So what do you take away from that, other than the fact that this was intentional? And God love you for embarrassing that guy, because in the 3 years of litigation that followed, we looked around the planet for any billeted general officer to open an investigation, a court-martial effect. We didn't find one, Tom, not one. We had a handful of 06s, it's your colonels and captains of the Navy. Lots and lots of lieutenant colonels jumped in and rallied troops and helped. Not one general officer in uniform stood, not a single one. And I want to get your impression on that. How is that? How can that be? Does that go back to the Obama purge? Will you fire on Americans? Were you around for that?
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of times these generals get to be generals because they're yes men. We call it boot licking. They basically kiss the boots of those that are higher above them until they finally get in that position themselves. I hate to say that, but I was bitterly disappointed by the senior staff of the military. I think the troops, a lot of them were obviously didn't want to take the shots, but they were coerced into doing it. What else could they do?
Yes.
You got 15 years into your career. You got 5 more to go before your retirement. Are you supposed to give up your entire retirement just to not take the jab? It was terrible what they did to them.
Thanks to you, and a lot of people don't understand this. 400,000 service members stood, all said and done, and they said, no, we're not doing it. The military was telling everybody it was a 98% or 99% complete hogwash. We had their internal documents because we had whistleblowers throughout the military. The best uptake they got on one shot was 74%. At the time, there was 1.4 million service members or so in the military, and effectively a quarter, more than a quarter, said screw you, and that's what forced the Congress to retire the law. God bless you, man. I mean, to stand in the face of that storm is heroic, and I really truly mean that.
Well, thank you. But as you know, the people that took the shot, according to Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long and Pete Chambers and Tom Renz, were damaged severely by it. Many of them were. The DMED database shows all the horrid, side effects that started.
By the way, our law firm is now accepting clients who were like yourself, except for the fact that if you took the shot, you were in the military, we can now pursue damages. We're in a position to do that. So we're starting down that road, but I really wish I hadn't have been. There is rumblings. I understand that this administration is going to make good on the rescission order that Congress made and make everybody whole in the military. That has not happened. So what Congress said had to happen to put you back the way you were is what made whole means. I pray that's going to happen. And I don't know if you've heard anything about that.
Yeah, I hope that they do restore all those people that were wronged. I have a hard time believing that a lot of them may want to come back because it's hard to come back and work with people that threw you under the bus.
Trust in leadership is gone, and I think this is a good thing, actually, Tom, because the playbook, which we have, and it's one of the reasons why we sued, was to use the military to force shots on everybody. And the one thing that we had success with in our temporary restraining orders, we got Austin to retire the use of force authorization. So he put that in the drawer, but that's all that he did. And my concern is that they'll reactivate that again, because what do we see now? The Trump administration is getting rid of the anti-vaxxers. That's you and me. And now they've cozied up with Big Pharma, and I am deeply concerned. I really want Mr. Trump to be the transformative guy that's going to save our republic. But when half the world's population was attacked, poisoned intentionally, there has to be a reckoning. And now today, what we're going to talk to you about is not only people that have died as a result, they have these white clots, and a lot of people are familiar with this, but there are also people still living, and all of a sudden this white clot thing has gone away. So you did something about this. Tell us what you did, how you got there, and where you're at now.
Sure. Like in a way, me getting fired was a blessing because it gave me the time then in retirement to do these 3 surveys I've done with these embalmers. And it all started for me, Todd, in November of 2022. I watched that movie Died Suddenly when it premiered the week of November of Thanksgiving. And an amazing statement was made in that movie at the 13-minute and 15-second mark. An embalmer from the state of Indiana, Mr. Wallace Hooker, was lecturing at an Ohio Embalmers Association conference in Columbus, Ohio on the 26th of October in 2022. And he's lecturing to a room of about 100 embalmers. And he showed them photographs of these white fibrous clots that he had been pulling out of his corpses for about the last year at that time. And he said, by a show of hands, how many of you are seeing these unusual white fibrous clots in your corpses too? Well, he says in the movie, almost all 100 embalmers raised their hands yes. He then asked them, when did you start seeing these? And they said, they agreed it was in the middle of 2021, about 6 months after the vaccines rolled out. Right. So I thought that was an amazing statement, right? Either those embalmers raised their hands or they didn't. So I got up the next day, Tuesday of that week of Thanksgiving of 2022, and I said to myself, I don't think any reporter is going to chase after this story. So I called the Ohio Embalmers Association located in Cincinnati, Ohio, talked to their president, Mr. Dan Becker, their vice president, Mr. Woody Wilson, and their secretary, Mr. David Hicks. I asked all 3 gentlemen, hey, did you happen to be in the room at the time that those embalmers supposedly raised their hands? Well, none of them happened to be in the room at the time. However, the vice president, Mr. Woody Wilson, who runs his own funeral home up in Marysville, Ohio, about an hour north of where I live in Dayton, and he does his own embalming. A lot of funeral directors do their own embalming. Woody said to me, Tom, I'm seeing the white fibrous clots too. I said, wow. Now I have an official officer. And by the way, Woody's now the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, corroborating these 6 or 7 embalmers in this Died Suddenly film that said they were seeing these white fibrous clots. So right then and there, Todd, I decided I needed to do a nationwide survey, which then I later on turned into a worldwide survey by including Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand to just see how prevalent these white fibrous clots were. And the results of my 3 surveys have been just shocking, Todd.
Well, first and foremost, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you did this, right? You took it on yourself to do it, but for people like you, Tom, we wouldn't know these things. And so, instead of laying down and waiting for the end, you got up and you started fighting in the way that you knew how. So you created a survey and you sent it out. I think that this is circa 2022. And only 1 state took you up with this. How did that happen?
When I did my first survey at the end of 2022, what I did is I worked with a nice woman, a friend of mine up in Northeast Ohio, Laura Kasner, and she happens to be an expert in SurveyMonkey. So we use SurveyMonkey as our tool to do the survey. So I developed the questions through the very first survey, and we sent it out. In fact, all 3 surveys we've sent out to 50 national, regional, and state funeral director associations, each with hundreds of members under them. Yeah. And then we also looked up the email addresses for over 1,700 funeral homes around the world and sent the email to them directly with the link to the survey to try to maximize the number of results. That first survey, we only got 179 responses to, but of those responses, we got 2/3 of the embalmers, 119 out of the 179, said they were indeed seeing the white fibrous clots. And they were seeing them in an average of 30% of their corpses, Todd. So these things are prevalent. This is not a rare phenomenon.
No, this is not anecdotal.
And then the other thing is the main consensus of the embalmers agreed that this phenomenon started for them in the year 2021 after the rollout of the vaccines. This is a phenomenon. These white fibrous clots they have never seen before prior to the years of COVID and the vaccine. Yeah,
there's a causal relationship between the shots and the white clots. And then for some reason, Pennsylvania took you up on this charge, and you got a whole lot more responses from there. What did you see? How did that work? Yeah, in my second survey that I did at the end of 2023, that particular funeral director association in Pennsylvania came through big time. They supplied me with about 125 responses from embalmers in just that one state alone. So I had a total of 269 responses to my 2023 survey.
And in that survey, the embalmers saw there were 73% of the embalmers said they were seeing the white fibrous clots. Now, the percentage of corpses went down a little bit. It went down from 30% down to 20%, which is you kind of expect that, because as we get further and further away from most Americans taking their jabs way back in 2021, because most people passed on the boosters, you might expect to see less white fibrous clots as you get further and further away from 2021. But it was still a significant number. And we also asked them about another phenomenon called microclotting, of which about 80% of the embalmers said they were seeing that phenomenon in about 1 out of every 4 corpses. And that could be just as dangerous as the white fibrous clots, because the microclotting occurs at the capillary level and can block the exchange of oxygen at the lungs, and then they carry that oxygen to all your major organs of the body, like your brain, your eyes.
Yes.
That's why you might see brain fog or poor vision problems in some people.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right.
But here's what's really strange, Todd. When I did this latest survey that I just wrapped up about a month ago to see what the embalmers were seeing through the year 2024, that same Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association that had participated so well in my 2023 survey declined to participate in my 2024 survey. Yeah. And that's in spite of the fact that their own president says that he's seeing the clots too. Let me read to you.
What do you make of that? Yeah, please.
Let me read to you what he wrote to me. This is an email he wrote to me on the 20th of November. He said, "Hey, Tom, I'll see what I can do." And he's trying to get his executive board to forward this year's survey to all their embalmers in the state of Pennsylvania, their membership, so they can take the survey. He says, "I was one of the embalmers who responded to the survey last year regarding the clot situation, so I do recognize this to be a current situation. I see," and he mentions the name of a colleague on this email, and he and I do quite a bit of chatting together about it. And I do help his firm when he's away, so I do see the same things that he's experiencing. More concerning to me is the poor distribution I've been experiencing to the extremities, clots aside. Nearly every person that I embalm is not getting good distribution to one or both of the hands below the elbow, something I have not seen in the past." So here I have the president of the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association admitting he's seeing problems, yet their organization failed to forward the survey this year to all their embalmers to take. Isn't that strange?
No, I mean, given everything that's happened in terms of hushing this up and hoping that it's going to go away, this makes perfect sense to me. There's a couple of things I would add in this. Doing a little bit of research on your efforts is that, these guys, the embalmers, are saying, look, based on the distribution you're talking about, that necessarily means people running around with these clots. They don't even know it, but they're running around with these clots. And then you look at some of the pictures where one poor guy survived it, but you should see the clots out of his lungs that they took. It looks like, lung matter. It's actually kind of like 3D printing what your lungs look like. And they're there. Other experts that we know that have studied this, actually written books about it from the South Pacific, Southeast Asia region, have testified expertly and written it down in their books that these are effectively a form of PVC pipe. All the ingredients are more or less the same. It's a different density and flexibility, but it uses tin as a buffer. And Lisa, who's going to rejoin us here in a little bit, and I did quite a bit of research and work on this many years ago, and we came to understand the purpose of these clots is for radio transmissions. Effectively, they're antennas. So inside of the lipid nanoparticles, they are actually nanobots. They're autonomous. They're self-assembling. All of the documents as it relates to Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson talk about self-assembling lipid nanoparticles. Those are bots. And they are utilizing biorhythms, believe it or not, for power sources, cloud computing, things of all that nature. It's actually in the military's original study, C459-1001, which yielded 1,291 new diseases the participants didn't show up to the clinical trial with. You can imagine that. But the point of this is that this is intentional. This is part of the transhumanist movement. Early on in this, when we were looking into transhumanism, and believe it or not, there's a SynBio division of Health and Human Services dedicated to genetically modifying every plant and animal species on the planet, including ourselves. Their expectations were that 2.2% of the people that took this intervention, it's an installation of technology, 2.2% would survive. So here we go into 2025, 3 and 4 years in some cases later. The notable experts we have, Dr. Long, Chambers, amongst others, are saying this is when the real die-off begins. These malfunctions in people's genetic programming are coming to fruition, including the deletion of the 1p36 gene deletion syndrome. So if you wonder why people aren't thinking straight, it's because the blood supply has been cut off to their head. And one of our doctors says that they can tell whether or not somebody's been vaxxed simply by looking in their eye, because they see the microclots that you described. So that's the litmus test. And believe it or not, they're trying to keep our skies safe by having all the pilots that got the shots go through a remedial screening to make sure they're not going to fall dead at the stick, which of course has happened. So this problem hasn't gone away, Tom. And I want to understand in your mind, because you certainly thought about this, how do you stop this? What are your plans, your steps? How do you envision this is going to end? Because it's not over.
You're absolutely right, Todd. You know, and I just keep trying to sound the alarm, because it's hard to put a lot of faith in your politicians, because they haven't been able to seem to do a lot yet, right? And you wonder about how are they in the pockets of big pharma?
Well, how about Fauci getting a pardon?
I know that's demoralizing, absolutely. But you know what you and I can do, and others that are like us, is we can advise people from the bottom up not to take these shots, right? That's the best advice that we can give to people, is just don't take any mRNA-based jabs using the lipid nanoparticle technology, right? Because the group of scientists and myself and Richard Hirschman are in touch with right now, and you know a few of them as well, Todd.
I do.
Is they believe that the jabs are definitely causing these white fibrous clots. At the moment the lipid nanoparticle opens up to release its modified RNA payload, it's exposing phosphorus heads on that lipid nanoparticle, and that has a great affinity for our body's natural fibrinogen, which is in a liquid state, and then it normally converts into a white solid called fibrin for the normal clotting process. But in this case, it's not making it into fibrin. Instead, it's combining with the phospholipid nanoparticle and the spike protein that's produced by the modified RNA, and it's forming this absolutely bizarre polymer instead. Very strange.
They are polymerizing us, and as I understand it, that includes the stuff in the skies. It is all a function, like I said, genetically modifying humanity. They're turning us into a different species. So when we say this is an extinction level event, whether you're dead or a new species, doesn't matter. Humanity is forever gone, and that's the concern that we have, and what it is we've been trying to stop. But given your experiences over the last few years, what happens when the government says, "Oh, bird flu, everybody got to take these shots"? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I'm scared, Todd, because we haven't even got into the results of this latest survey. Did you realize 83% of the embalmers responding to my 2024 survey said they're still seeing the white fibrous clots? And they're seeing it in an average of 27% of their corpses. So it went back up from 20% to 27%. So that's and I had expected it to go down. Like it says, we got further and further away from the jabs in 2021, but instead it went the opposite direction. Yeah. And the microclotting is still present. 80% of the embalmers said they saw that in about 22% of their corpses. So you take those two things combined, and like I said, the white clots they never saw prior to COVID or the vaccines.
Right.
The microclotting they had seen in chemotherapy patients prior to COVID, but in way less than 5% of the corpses.
Back in the 80s.
So there's at least a quintupling or quadrupling of that effect. So we still have a very serious blood clotting problem. You know, it's like you say, these things are forming in living people right now, and people may not even feel it. As long as the clots are small enough, blood can still flow around them. You may feel fatigue, shortness of breath, tightness in your chest, like I said, with brain fog, vision problems could be some indications. But
okay, so I've got a question for you then, given that. What is it that you have as an expectation in terms of finding a cure? How do we dissolve these clots? Have you guys figured that out yet?
No, they're very hard to dissolve. In fact, I'm in touch with a endovascular specialist and cardiologist from Jacksonville, Florida. Another gentleman, Dr. Philip McMillan in the UK, is in touch with another whistleblower here in the United States as well. And both of their experiences is you really can't dissolve these white fibrous clots that well. They'll use normal clot busting drugs such as TPA, tissue plasminogen activator, to break up normal grape jelly clots, and those work well against grape jelly clots. But for these white fibrous clots, you pretty much have to go in and get them with flexible catheters. In these catheterization labs, you have to use catheters that either suck them out, scrape them out, or they will lasso the clot and pull it out that way.
My dear Lord above.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
We had, some of the reports that we had gotten, Todd, is that when they are forming, they adhere to the side of the vessel wall. And so it's almost like it's an adhesive. It becomes an adhesive to that vessel wall. So, they are tubes that are set in there to create an artificial, presence.
Antenna? Yes.
Yes.
In varying lengths. And that's the whole point, is that different frequencies operate at different wavelengths. And the whole point is that the length of the antenna dictates what that machine, because that's what they're doing, SynBio, what that machine can actually understand, receive, and transmit. And so it makes perfect sense that they would have metallic components. I also, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw one of our whistleblower / experts said that frequencies are now being found to dissolve these clots. Do you have anything on that?
Yes, that is coming out, that there is some benefit to altered frequencies, and obviously, a lower frequency, because Tom, when you were talking about radiation, obviously manipulation of frequency is a huge component of all of this. Department of Energy is running one of these ships because this is all about energy and the conversion of our biological system into a energy source. So frequency has the ability to be able to manifest with these clots, or at least the technology, so that if somebody is in a zone where the frequency is higher, there has been signs of stress to the body that have had the shots. And then when they're outside of a zone with frequency, as Todd just mentioned, that it can dissipate, and that there are, the clots will even go away, or the nanoparticles will not be active.
They fade in and out of this dimension is what it is that we've actually.
And that draws in the quantum dots that are also.
I know that in order to keep the clots from forming in the first place, people like Dr. Peter McCall and others have talked about protocols to lessen the amount of spike protein and get rid of the spike protein in the body, using products like nattokinase, bromelain, curcumin. I've heard NAC, EDTA, DMSO have been mentioned as ways to help keep the spike.
Vitamin C.
But
huge.
Nicotine.
That's exactly right. Nicotine.
Pure nicotine.
Yes, I've heard that as well.
Honey.
So there are protocols out there to try to help people from forming the clots in the first place by detoxing the body of the damaging spike protein.
Don't run into anything, because you might get a bruise, and that bruise is going to turn into a white fibrous clot. So be careful.
Well, and we do have to educate people too, to be aware of all of the devices that we are using. If you've got a couple of cell phones all day long and you've got computers running, I mean, it is about EMF. It is about exposure to radiation and electrical magnetic waves and radio frequency.
And what worries me, Todd, is if there's 25% of the corpses have these white fibrous clots in them, it runs through your head. What's the next question you ask yourself? Well, what percentage of the living are walking around right now with these things growing inside them to the point where they'll eventually cause a stroke or a heart attack? Include
everybody.
Yes, well, and I have a question about that exact topic, Tom, is do you know if the embalmers, if any state or federal official or authority came to collect those clots? How were they disposed of?
In the discussions, I just had a few short discussions with my cath lab whistleblower in Jacksonville, Florida, and he says for the most part they're throwing the clots away after they remove them from the living. And the embalmers are doing the same thing. They're throwing the clots away, except for people like Richard Hirschman, who keep them assembled. So the evidence is being destroyed, right? They're not being sent to pathology. If you remove a bizarre clot from somebody, you should be sending that to pathology for analysis. But it's not. The evidence is being thrown away.
Well, and wherever they're thrown, they're still. They don't necessarily need a host. I mean, the mindset could be that they're part of a technology that is functioning on its own. It just had a host to develop. So if it's taken out, but it is still active with EMF, it could potentially still be turned
Not
on.
potentially. This is part of the work that Dr. Pedro Chavez was doing in Mexico. He's a colonel in the army, and he's also a medical doctor. And they were finding electronic signals coming from newly buried dead 6 feet under the ground. Their bodies are still putting out a signal. And this goes back to some of the information that we had found and dug up that Lisa said it, that they're, harnessing people's bodies for electricity and for cloud computing. And there's actually a patent on this. It's 2020060606. And Bill Gates is the owner of the patent and says, oh, by the way, we're going to use these bodies for cloud computing, those battery and power sources. Lo and behold, we find in the shot cesium-137, radioactive material that when it encounters living tissue, it turns it into a transistor, transceiver, transmitter, transducer, and amplifier. So we found all of these pieces, believe it or not, coming from the military's own study, 44,000 service members, that included wireless transmission of cellular changes inside of the victims. That's the volunteers for this study, inside their bodies, through the mobile network to Israel and then back to the DoD et al. With laundered data so that they could bury it. And people thought, well, this is sci-fi, it's the future. And then we found there's a website called inpersona.com. They have since pulled it down because we shamed them. They were bragging, and we have it. We still have the stupid thing, their website. But they had bragged about using 1.4 trillion heartbeats already to mine cryptocurrency. So if you read the Bill Gates patent and you look at what it was they said they've already done, this has been commercialized. This is so mature. If you can imagine this piece of science and this market is so mature, they now have standards. Yeah. Standards only come from large numbers. So what that necessarily means is they've been at this for a long time, and we're just catching on. I mean, if you do the math on 1.4 trillion heartbeats, how many people does it take to do that? It's astounding how long that they've been at this. So this science, Lisa, I mean, some of this goes back into the 60s, does it not?
Well,
when you start seeing these applications.
Yeah, with the Department of Energy, because they've been contaminating, the four corners of the United States, and the waterways that go into, and, cesium-137 mimics potassium, so it's water soluble. And in the 60s, we have found several receipts and contracts that the pollution of cesium-137 atmospherically in water sources, the environment, life and natural wildlife, and because it's water soluble, our biological systems absorbed it and accepted it. So that was, that's radioactive material, and that was all funded by Department of Energy. So, and I wanted to tell Tom too, we have found with our patent reports is that the bacteria that is used in vaccines and pharmaceutical products are primed with chemical compounds. These chemical compounds are all assigned with IP addresses, 16-digit IP addresses that directly connect to IBM's supercomputer.
Yes.
Wow.
Exactly. So that means your body, if you've had the shots, is now hooked into the Google Mesh network. It's about 6 months old, and they are now harvesting your data.
Yeah.
At this moment in time, and it's
well, you're blowing my mind, Todd and Lisa, because and just from a pure psychological damage standpoint, the embalmers have been through a lot these last 4 years, because they're seeing a lot of like younger people, kids in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that should be living a great life. Yes. And they're winding up on the table of these embalmers because they've had these strokes and heart attacks from these horrible white fibrous clots and the microclotting. Is I actually went about a month or so ago to a funeral of my cousin's daughter, who was only 24 years old, and she died of a brain aneurysm. And the first thing I thought of was probably the spike protein, either from the virus or the shot. Probably got her, caused a case of vasculitis, a weakening of the walls of the blood vessels. So it's just horrific what these things have done to humanity.
It is. So, I just was reading an article over the weekend that pediatricians are seeing colon cancer in 5, 6, 7-year-old boys.
Yes.
It's just horrific. And, again, we were talking earlier before the show is, we are the idea that something so destructive to humanity or to the body that is being promoted and being forced upon us. You know, what does that lead you to? It leads to the fact that we are fighting an enemy that really does despise the human, humanity. And that's hard to understand, but it is this concept of needing our bodies to facilitate this bacterium-based energy. So it's about population control, as we were talking about, Todd, as you've said, but it is also about a transforming and altering the body so that we continue to produce this energy source.
And eat crickets. And you'll be happy playing video games in your little hovel. Tom, how do you see your way? How do people see their way out of this? Do you have a vision on how, somebody carrying the torch? How do we lead our way out of this?
I think it's just people waking up. Like you say, you're right. I and others that like yourselves, we realize that at some point this is almost a spiritual battle between good and evil.
Not almost. It is.
It is. It's a spiritual battle. So that's what I tell people. And we try to wake people up by bringing the information to them. And a lot of times, tragically, they come to it on their own when something tragic happens to themselves or a member of their family. And they say, oh, my goodness, For example, out here, the wildfires in California, I think it took some of those people in the Palisades to unfortunately have their own homes burned down before they realized that, hey, maybe I've been supporting the wrong political party all this time. Unfortunately, I think the same thing may have to happen to people. And I think most of us know somebody who has been touched by a vaccine injury, not just these clots, like you say, myocarditis, nerve damage, miscarriages, all kinds of things going on. So I think America is waking up, thank goodness. But we just need to keep going.
Keep doing it.
Going.
I think part of the answer is that we have to collectively, as a species, stop relying on others to do our thinking for us.
Amen.
So when the government says this is good for you, take it. Question that.
Run.
I hate that. Run. I mean, this is the reality is when you have somebody who intentionally poisons you, they're not trying to help you, dude. They're trying to mitigate their unfunded liability. What it is you're going to receive in terms of a pension goes away if you are dead. So it looks like we have, there was some question that came in. I'm not sure if I understand that. But Lisa, have you got another question before we run out of time today?
I do. Did have any of the directors from your survey, did they strike up conversations with you, or were they intrigued and wanted to know more from you?
In fact, the president of the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, Mr. Taylor Moore, invited me to come speak next summer in front of his entire audience at their next convention that they're having next summer.
That's fantastic.
The dam is starting to break. There are funeral director associations. We got good responses this year from Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Alabama, Florida, and Louisiana. So we got good answers from response out of those embalmer. But I sent it out to 30 U.S. state embalmer associations and funeral director associations. So that's only 6 out of 30, right? So there's only 1/5 of the associations are still participating in these surveys. And we're into year 4 of this now.
Well,
so they need to get on the right side of this thing now, because it's not. I think a lot of them
not going away.
It's not going away.
No, it is not.
Tom, and thank you for carrying the torch and leading us, because this is evidence. We have them, right? We know they are. We can say it came out of that guy. He's a victim. And we did a comment here from Sarah. I think it's Sarah 236. She says David Icke knows about some of this stuff. Sarah, if you know David, I'd love to chat with him. I've watched him for years.
I also, by the way, the Pennsylvania, in addition to the Pennsylvania Funeral Director Association President Chris Calvey, who said he's seen the clots. Mr. Woody Wilson, as I mentioned earlier, who's the president of the Ohio Embalmer Association, says he's seen the clots. Also, Mr. Kevin Swire, who's the president of the Manitoba, Canada Funeral Service Association for the entire province of Canada, says that he's seen the clots.
Let's get him on the stand. You know what? I want to have a chance to examine them. I mean, because this. So given everything that you have seen and do, when you're talking to third parties about this, what happens? How are you getting through to people?
It's hard because, as Lisa mentioned earlier, because I call usually when I do my survey, I send it out my first email this time it was the 11th of November is when I started the survey. Then at the end of November, I sent out a second email saying, hey, there's still time to take the survey. And then I also send one at the end, right before the survey, and say we still have a week ago before the survey closes. But I'll also call. I have the phone numbers of all these presidents of these 30 U.S. state associations. So I call and I talk to the president or secretary or somebody else in their office. And a lot of times when I talk to these presidents, I ask them, hey, have you been looking at YouTube videos or have you been watching movies like Died Suddenly? And what's shocking is many of them have never seen Died Suddenly. They don't know anything about the YouTube videos, like interviews like we're doing right now.
Wow.
It's all like there's a total lack of curiosity, despite the fact that 83% of their embalmers say that they're seeing the white fibrous clots. There's still this lack of curiosity of them to go on the web and find out more about it.
Well, what you don't know is probably easier for some.
Well,
it's like
this is the point.
I've got two theories about. Let me tell you my two theories, Todd.
Yeah, dude, go ahead.
First of all, I think a lot of these funeral director association presidents, they're funeral directors themselves, right? They elect one of their own as the president of their association. Well, would you want to participate in a survey that might show a link between the COVID-19 vaccines and these white fibrous clots and microclotting if you had mandated that all the people that work in your funeral home take the COVID-19 vaccine, right? You're setting yourself up for a libel, right? And then also as I said earlier, 80% of American adults over the age of 18 took the first two COVID vaccines themselves. So there might be some personal cognitive dissonance going on, right? They may not want to know the answers to the questions themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is really important. What you set up is really important, and I think this actually goes along with the Trump administration because he was the guy who said, "I'm father of vaccines, and Warp Speed is mine," even though Operation Warp Speed had been launched in 2016. It's not just liability that attaches, especially if you're a funeral director and you're doing an autopsy, you see these white clots, you make the causal link to the shots, and then don't do anything about it. What level of criminal culpability do you have? Because you knew, right? You can't say you didn't know, but then you mandate your people to take the shots. To your point, Tom, that is criminal, right? That's the point. And that's where that trail leads all the way back to every government, not just ours, but all of them.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for doctors too, right? They told their patients to get the shot, right? And then they gaslit them when they came in with problems, side effects from the shots. The hospitals also got paid lots of money whenever a death was coded as COVID, right?
Well, could there be excuse me, I interrupted you, but this question could maybe lead legally. Could there be an inventory check? Like when what is it when you have your taxes, when a tax person comes in, they do an audit. Like, how are they describing these white fibrous tumors in their official, list of things that they find in an
embalmers don't. The embalmers don't do that. The embalmers they're preparing a body to be viewed in a funeral, right? Now there is one who does it, and it's Richard Hirschman. He has been keeping on his computer a list of all the corpses and then which ones had the white fibrous clots, which ones didn't. So when we ask questions about what percentage of your corpses have these clots, he can give me a very accurate number.
Wow.
But very few of the embalmers around the country are tracking like Richard is that information. Now, that is different, though, than vascular surgeons and endovascular specialists, Lisa. You're absolutely right. Those doctors should be keeping very meticulous records of who they're pulling these white fibrous clots out of, the patients that are still living, and they do have access to all their COVID vaccination records. They can tell you how many shots they took, when they took their shots, which brands. But again, we're not getting that information from them because their whole thing was about pushing the shots on people.
Right.
So the last thing they want to do is incriminate themselves by revealing that, and what we were fairly
aware
of and have knowledge of is that it's these shots that are causing these white fibrous clots. Because Dr. McMillan's whistleblower says 99% of the time when he finds the white fibrous clots, that person's been jabbed with anywhere between 1 to 8 jabs. And the more jabs they've taken, the worse the clotting seems to be.
That's what we wanted to know. And ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time today. Sarah, thank you for some of your comments. If you can introduce Mr. Ike to any of us, we'd be happy to get him on. We'll launch a team to get him on because I'm interested in what he has to say. But Tom, fascinating to understand what it is you've been up to for the last 3 years. And I really pray that you don't stop doing this because somebody has to. And you're leading the charge on this. And I got to tell you, I know there's a bunch of really smart scientists behind you. It seems to me that, like the spike proteins, solving for that problem, we need to solve for the right frequency or whatever it is to dissolve these things. Because if humanity doesn't survive this, then who is the guardians of what's left? Right? That's the problem. Is that we become programmed and owned. Who is going to protect the rest of the species, whether that's humans or otherwise? We're in an extinction level event. And if we aren't out trying to save lives, if we aren't out trying to solve these problems, go dig a hole in the backyard, because the end is coming. So ladies and gentlemen, get off the couch. Use Tom as an example. You can do your own thing. Tom, God bless you for that. I appreciate you picking up this torch. Lisa, as always, thanks to you and to the Clout Hub and Vax Choice team. God bless you on this Martin Luther King Day and Inauguration Day for President Trump. I pray for his strength, and more importantly, I pray for his wisdom. Please, sir, fight for humanity, because this is it. We're in the last hour. Yeah. God bless, guys. Thanks for being here.
Tom, lovely to meet you.
Nice. Thank you.